Hi guys, it's Tabitha here with another video essay for y'all. I got really excited about this play, and it's an older play. It's from like the early 2000s. I believe the exact year is 2001. But the play that I'm going to be reviewing today is the Lieutenant of Inishmore by Martin McDonagh. And if you haven't read it, spoilers, just because I'm not explaining the plot of this play. I'm kind of just deep diving into it and hitting critical points. I'm not going to be explaining the major plot points or any plot points in general because I think it's just going to take up too much time, and you and I have better things to do. So with that, let's get into it. So let's talk about some of the major themes in McDonagh's play. Now, this is set in Northern Ireland in like the 90s, 2000s. So this is when England is still being a pain in the ass for historical context. Let's talk about why McDonagh wanted to write this play, or why he chose certain elements of this play to heavily portray. The first one being desensitizing violence. In McDonagh's play, there is violence in literally every scene, to the point where I couldn't pick just one example for this. I picked multiple over the course of 9 scenes. I had multiple from each scene. I believe the only scene that I couldn't pick like a desensitizing violence example for was scene 7, because it was a page long. You know, he uses so much violence, and as an audience you must think like, oh, it must be like a little unnecessary. It's not. Everything is so purposeful, and especially how much violence there is, because the characters are already desensitized to it. So when Donnie holds up a dead cat in the first scene, you know, as an audience we're like, oh my god, that's so gross, and it's so violent. But then by the end of the play, we are so used to it that we don't even flinch when like human lives are being taken on stage, which happen. That we become like the characters. We become desensitized. We become used to that amount of violence, and we do nothing about it. I think the best point to describe this is actually in the last scene, and it's by Myreed, out of all characters. She simply states, I thought shooting fellas would be fun, but it's not. It's dull. This is on scene 9, page 66. That describes this play perfectly, especially with this theme of desensitizing violence. There's just so much violence that at the end of the day it becomes dull. The theatrics of it boil down over time because there's nothing you can do at that point. You're an audience member sitting there being like, I see why they did it, but I don't understand the need for it. And that was the point. There was so much violence going on in Northern Ireland at the time where people were normal people were becoming genuinely desensitized to the amount of violence happening. I mentioned it a little bit of us being desensitized to it because the theatrics at the end of the day will become desensitizing, but at the beginning we actually have great theatrics with a bunch of dead cats being on stage, and even in the second scene where the torturee, I believe that's the correct term, the torturee is hanging upside down for the entirety of the scene. That is intriguing to see on stage. That is rich, it's dramatic, it's fulfilling, and it's written that way to keep us intrigued with this gory plotline. At the boiling point of conflict in scene 8, we actually don't get to see the main violence. We don't get to see the main fight. We get to see the death, but we don't get to see the main fight that leads us there. And as an audience member, that makes us feel a little cheated, you know? Having all this violence throughout the show, but not being able to see like the climactic point of violence, it makes us feel cheated and left out. And that's when McDonagh brings back the characters on stage, brings back the in-law boys, the in-law trio, Christy, Brendan, and Joey, back on stage for Patrick and Myreed to kill together in a weird, murderous waltz kind of way. By bringing them back on stage, we don't feel that sense of cheated anymore. McDonagh flips us on our head, and our expectations especially. So let's talk a little bit about another prevalent theme throughout this entire show, which is the concept of vigilante justice. Let's talk about Patrick, starting off. Patrick believes that what he's doing is right. Everything in this show, he justifies it with some sort of sympathy. Especially, we see this in scene 2. When Patrick talks to James, the torturee, about cutting his toenails off. He's not sympathetic. He says, well, you're lucky I did him on 1 foot, because if I did him on 2 feet, then you'd be limping on both feet, and then it'd be worse. You're still cutting off toes. But he thinks what he's doing is right because that guy was a drug dealer. Whilst I'm saying that drug dealers do deserve some crime and punishment, taking it into your own hands and using it for pleasure, using it for your own personal gain, is not correct. And that's what Patrick doesn't know. That's what Patrick doesn't learn throughout this entire play. Myreed is another great example of this, shooting Davy when we first meet her in the cheek because she thinks that cat deserved a life, even though she probably never met that cat. But she knows her brother way well. This shows a Robin Hood-esque mindset between those two characters who are directly parallels of each other, let's be real here. But how does this affect us as an audience? As an audience, we want to root for the main characters on stage, but especially with this Robin Hood-esque mindset and them trying to justify themselves, we become used to that justification. We become used to them doing these acts so that we can root for them and have sympathy for them by the end. But just because we know the motivations behind Patrick killing 3 people and then Myreed killing Patrick subsequently after, that does not mean that it makes it okay. But McDonough is smart and he twists us in a way to where we think they deserved it. They definitely deserved it. It was over one cat. It was over one cat. It was not needed. When this play is done well, the audience leaves the theater with the mindset that what they were doing was correct, even though they were not. They completely are brainwashed in the same way that if you're watching a cult movie, you'd be brainwashed in that way. McDonough's very smart in that aspect, wanting you to realize what's wrong with the picture and probably tricking you to not see it at first. It makes us shift our pre-existing morals and beliefs into his morals, into their beliefs as characters, because we see their motivations behind it and we agree with them. And that's dangerous. If you think any of Patrick's or Myreed's actions over the course of the show are justified, good, you fell in McDonough's trap. That's perfect, that's what he wanted you to do. So finally, let's talk about power dynamics within the structure of this show. I think McDonough loves to shift power dynamics and to turn pre-existing power dynamics on its head. This is extremely exemplified in the second scene where Patrick starts out with all the power over James. You know, he's the one literally torturing him. But by the end of the day, James gets to be let free because he started to control the situation. Even though he was severely disadvantaged, he had one source of power over Patrick, and it was the sensitivity over his cat, which is smart because it allows the audience to know that Patrick is an easily fumbled character. It allows us to see that he has a lot of flaws that can be taken advantage of even over one phone call. But even though we see the flaws in Patrick's character, it's not until scene 8 where we really see the power dynamic be shifted on his head again. With the trio from the in-law coming in and completely trying to change that power dynamic and Patrick not falling for it at first. Patrick was very nonchalant about the whole thing, even going as far as thinking that they are kidding for the longest time, and then he feels scared, and then he puts his weapons on the table. It takes a while for that power dynamic to shift, but once it does, it's noticeable, especially with the staging, especially with how it's written. Power dynamics are extremely common in a lot of written work. I'm not saying that McDonough created power dynamics, but I am saying that McDonough uses power dynamics to his advantage of making the show intriguing and enriching. He uses power dynamics so expertly that some characters think that they're driving the scene when in reality we as an audience know that they're not. For example, in scene 6 with Myreed and Patrick, we as an audience know that Myreed has more information over Patrick, but she's not letting it go. Meaning, she's putting herself in a weaker power dynamic so that she can win over Patrick's favor. Patrick thinks he's fully driving the scene, but in reality, we all know it's Myreed. But that's so smart, it keeps us on our toes. We're wondering, is Myreed gonna tell him? Is she gonna shift the power dynamic in the scene? And the answer is, she doesn't. She never does. But she could. And that's what keeps audiences entertained like that. That's what's theatrical about those power dynamics. That is it. That's what's dramatic about them, is that they are needed for us to be engaged and keep us on our toes as an audience member. It keeps us playing detective and keeps asking, it makes us ask, what's gonna happen next? Why are we watching this? Is she gonna tell him? Is she going to keep it for longer for personal gain? What is going to happen? I want to know. I'm gonna keep watching. Overall, I think this work is really brilliant. You know, he uses the small details in the play to further major plot points, which makes us as an audience have to be engaged with every single detail. There are things that I didn't even notice in the first read, in the second read, in the third read of this play, until like maybe the last couple of reads where I was like, that makes so much sense. Oh my god, because they were just such small details to where I didn't notice that they were there and that they were important. But that's all I got for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, press a like button down there. There's also a subscribe button down there, so if you want to subscribe to my channel and see more content like this, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good night, day, evening, whatever. And I will see you guys later. Bye!